In the digital age, we have convinced ourselves that isolation is a choice, that we can simply close a tab, power down a device. But some connections cannot be terminated. Some signals originate from places that exist outside your understanding of reality itself. If you are listening to this transmission, your feed is active. Your session is logged. To maintain the integrity of this archive, to ensure the file does not corrupt before completion, you must press the like button below. Subscribe to the frequency. Encrypt your access. Do it now. Good. Tonight's file comes from a law enforcement officer who discovered that protocol means nothing when the dead refuse to stay submerged. The dashcam footage has been preserved. Proceed with caution. I am parked directly under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent canopy of a 24-hour fuel station. I have locked all 4 doors. I have the engine running, the heater turned on high, and all the interior lights illuminated. I am surrounded by concrete and artificial light, and I still cannot stop my hands from shaking against the steering wheel. I am a county law enforcement officer. I have only been on the force for 2 years, but I have built a reputation for being strict, thorough, and completely reliant on protocol. I like rules. I like guidelines. In this line of work, the manual is your best tool. If you follow the steps, if you run the plates, if you approach the vehicle at the correct angle, you eliminate variables and maintain control of the situation. My assigned patrol sector is a massive, desolate stretch of a 2-lane county highway. It is a lonely, isolated assignment. The road runs along the eastern perimeter of a massive, deep, freshwater lake. The layout of the geography means there is absolutely nothing out there. On the left side of the highway, there is a steep, rocky embankment that drops directly down into the dark water of the lake. On the right side, there is an endless, dense expanse of thick pine forest. There are no houses, no streetlights, and no intersecting roads for over 40 miles. It is just a ribbon of dark asphalt, trapped between the deep woods and the deep water. I work the graveyard shift. I patrol this highway from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Usually, the entire 8-hour shift consists of driving back and forth in complete silence, listening to the hum of my tires and the occasional crackle of the dispatch radio. Sometimes I pull over a long-haul trucker who missed a turn, or a local teenager driving too fast. It is a quiet, predictable job. Tonight started exactly like every other night. The weather was clear but very cold. A thick layer of fog was rolling off the surface of the lake, creeping over the embankment and drifting across the asphalt. I was cruising at 40 miles per hour, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, scanning the dark road ahead with my headlights. At approximately 2:15 a.m., I saw a vehicle driving a few miles ahead of me. I sped up slightly to close the distance. It was a dark-colored minivan, an older model. It was traveling well under the speed limit, moving at maybe 30 miles per hour. As I got closer, I noticed 2 things. First, the passenger side taillight was completely burned out. Second, the vehicle was swerving. It was not a violent, erratic swerve, but a slow, drifting weave. The tires drifted over the solid yellow line in the center of the road, corrected slowly, and then drifted back over the white shoulder line near the edge of the lake embankment. Protocol for this is clear. A burned-out taillight is a minor traffic violation, but combined with the swerving, it establishes reasonable suspicion for driving under the influence, or extreme driver fatigue. I had to initiate a traffic stop. I pulled up behind the minivan, keeping a safe distance of 3 car lengths. I reached down to the center console and flipped the switch for my overhead emergency lights. The flashing red and blue strobes instantly illuminated the dark highway, reflecting off the thick pine trees on the right and cutting through the fog drifting off the lake on the left. The driver of the minivan reacted slowly. It took them nearly a quarter of a mile to register the lights in their rearview mirror. Eventually, the right turn signal blinked, and the van slowly pulled over onto the narrow gravel shoulder, coming to a stop just a few feet away from the steep drop-off into the water. I pulled my cruiser onto the shoulder behind them. I followed my training exactly. I offset my vehicle slightly to the left, creating a safety corridor between my cruiser and the flow of traffic. I angled my front wheels toward the road, so if a drunk driver rear-ended my cruiser, it would not be pushed forward into the minivan. I put the transmission in park, unbuckled my seatbelt, and grabbed my heavy metal flashlight. I stepped out into the cold night air. The only sounds were the low rumble of the 2 idling engines, the crunch of the gravel under my boots, and the faint, rhythmic lapping of the lake water hitting the rocks at the bottom of the embankment. I walked up to the rear of the minivan. I reached out with my left hand and firmly pressed my palm against the trunk lid. This is another standard protocol. You leave your fingerprints on the vehicle. If something happens to you, the investigators will have physical proof that you were standing right behind that specific car. The metal of the trunk felt unusually cold and damp. I walked up the driver's side, keeping my flashlight pointed low. I stopped just behind the driver's side window, angling my body so I was not an easy target if the driver decided to open the door aggressively. I tapped the glass with my flashlight. The window rolled down manually with a squeaking sound. I shined the beam of my flashlight into the interior of the van. It was a perfectly normal family. The driver was a middle-aged woman. She looked incredibly exhausted. Her hair was messy, and there were dark, heavy bags under her eyes. She squinted against the glare of my flashlight.
"Good evening, ma'am,"
I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. "I am stopping you tonight because your passenger side taillight is completely out, and I noticed you were having some trouble maintaining your lane."
"I am so sorry, officer. We have been driving for a very long time. We just wanted to get there before morning. I guess I am more tired than I realized,"
she said. Her voice was quiet and hoarse. "It happens," I replied. "But driving exhausted on this stretch of highway is dangerous, especially this close to the water. I need to see your license, registration, and proof of insurance, please." She nodded slowly. She reached across the sleeping man in the passenger seat, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out a small stack of papers. She handed them to me, along with a plastic driver's license. When her fingers brushed against mine, her skin felt freezing cold. It felt like touching a piece of ice. "I'm going to take these back to my cruiser and run your information," I told her. "I will be right back. Please remain in the vehicle." She did not say anything. She just gave me a slow, tired nod and looked straight ahead through the windshield. I turned around and walked back to my cruiser. I climbed into the driver's seat, pulled the heavy door shut, and placed the license and registration on the center console. I turned on the overhead dome light so I could read the small print. I picked up my radio microphone. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I'm initiating a traffic stop on a dark-colored minivan, requesting a plate check."
Copy that, Unit 4. Go ahead with the plate number.
The radio crackled. The dispatcher on duty tonight was an older woman who usually worked the quiet shifts. I read the alphanumeric sequence off the registration paper.
Copy. Stand by. The system is running a little slow tonight.
I put the microphone down. I settled back into the seat, enjoying the warm air blowing from the heater vents. The heavy protocol of the stop was complete. Now, I just had to wait for the computer system to verify the documents, write a simple warning ticket for the broken tail light, and advise the tired mother to pull over and rest. While I waited, I glanced down at my center console. Mounted directly below the radio is a small, heavy-duty monitor. It displays the live video feed from the cruiser's dashboard camera. The camera records continuously during a traffic stop, capturing everything that happens directly in front of my vehicle. The video is strictly black and white, designed to capture high-contrast details like license plates in low-light conditions. Out of pure, ingrained habit, I looked at the monitor to ensure the camera was recording the minivan. I stopped breathing. The image displayed on the small screen was wrong. It was entirely, fundamentally wrong. I looked at the screen, and my brain struggled to process the visual information. The camera was pointed directly at the space in front of my cruiser. The red and blue strobe lights were flashing across the scene in alternating waves of bright white and deep black. The vehicle on the monitor was not the minivan I had just walked away from. The van on the screen was crushed. The roof was caved entirely inward, bending the metal frame down toward the seats. The rear bumper was twisted and hanging off by a single rusted bolt. The exterior was completely covered in thick, dark, hanging layers of aquatic algae and river weeds. The tires were flat, rotting, and half buried in thick mud. It looked exactly like a vehicle that had been pulled from the bottom of a lake after decades underwater. But that was not the part that made my blood turn to ice. The dashboard camera was positioned directly behind the rusted, crushed rear window of the van. The glass was shattered. Looking out through the broken back window, staring directly into the lens of the dashboard camera, were 4 faces. They were bloated. They were skeletal. The flesh on their faces was grey, peeling away from the bone in wet, ragged strips. Their eye sockets were empty, dark, hollow pits filled with stagnant water. They were pressed tightly together in the back of the crushed vehicle. The mother, the father, the 2 children. They were all looking directly at the camera, and they were smiling. It was not a natural expression. Their jawbones were pulled back, stretching the rotting, waterlogged skin into wide, unnatural, gaping grins. They were completely motionless, suspended in the grainy black and white feed, just staring and smiling at the lens. A wave of suffocating panic slammed into my chest. My hands gripped the edges of the monitor so hard, my knuckles turned white. I thought the camera system was malfunctioning. I tore my eyes away from the screen and looked up through my windshield. Parked 20 feet in front of me was the pristine, dark-colored minivan. The metal was clean. The roof was perfectly intact. The red glow of the functional brake light illuminated the gravel shoulder. Through the back window, I could see the silhouette of the two children sleeping peacefully under their blankets. I could see the mother looking into her side mirror, watching my cruiser. Everything was perfectly normal. I looked back down at the monitor. The crushed, rusted, algae-covered wreckage was still there. The 4 rotting skeletal corpses were still there. They had moved. The mother had raised her hand. A skeletal, bloated arm, covered in peeling wet skin and thick green weeds, was pressed against the shattered glass of the rear window. She was tapping on the glass from the inside. I could not hear the tapping through the heavy doors of my cruiser, but I could see the bone of her finger hitting the lens on the screen. Tap, tap, tap. They were still smiling that wide, gaping, impossible grin. I felt dizzy. I reached forward with a shaking hand and physically hit the side of the monitor, hoping to reset the feed. The screen flickered, but the image remained. The bloated corpses continued to stare.
Unit 4, this is dispatch.
Suddenly, the radio cracked loudly, breaking the heavy silence in the cruiser. The older woman's voice said she sounded deeply confused. Her professional tone had completely slipped. I grabbed the microphone, fumbling with the cord. Unit 4, go ahead.
I ran the plates and the license. Are you absolutely sure you read that sequence correctly? Are you sure you are looking at a dark minivan?
She said, slowly. Yes, I stammered, my eyes darting between the pristine van out the windshield and the nightmare on the screen. I am parked right behind it. Why?
The system flagged the registration. Those plates belong to a vehicle that was involved in a major missing persons case 30 years ago.
I felt the blood drain from my face. Missing. A family of 4. They were driving cross-country. They were last seen at a gas station near your current location. The police searched for weeks. The primary theory was that the driver fell asleep at the wheel and the vehicle went off the embankment into the lake. They never found the car. They never found the bodies. The license you gave me belongs to the mother. Her status is listed as legally dead. The radio went silent. I sat completely frozen in the driver's seat. The heater was blowing hot air onto my face, but I was shivering uncontrollably. I slowly raised my head and looked through the windshield. The pristine minivan was gone. It had not driven away. I had not heard the engine start. I had not heard the tires crunching on the gravel. The red brake light was simply gone. The space in front of my cruiser was completely empty. I reached up and engaged the mechanical lever for the high-powered spotlight mounted on the driver's side pillar. I twisted the handle, aiming the bright beam of light directly at the patch of gravel where the van had been parked seconds ago. There were no tire tracks. Instead, covering the gravel shoulder was a massive puddle of thick, black, stagnant water. The water was actively bubbling, seeping quickly into the dirt. A horrible, foul smell began to enter the air vents of my cruiser. It smelled like dead fish, rotting wood, and ancient, stagnant mud. I looked down at the dashboard monitor. The screen was displaying a live feed of the empty gravel shoulder and the puddle of water. The crushed van was gone. The corpses were gone. I dropped the radio microphone onto the passenger seat. I could barely grab the gear shift. I needed to put the cruiser in drive. I needed to turn around and drive away from the lake as fast as the engine would allow. Protocol did not matter anymore. I just needed to leave. I grabbed the gear shift and pulled it down into drive. Before my foot could touch the accelerator, the entire patrol cruiser violently lurched. It was a massive, concussive impact that originated from the right side of the vehicle. The heavy metal frame of the Ford Explorer groaned under the sudden stress. My head snapped to the right, hitting the headrest. The cruiser was moving. It was being dragged sideways. Something was pulling the 2-ton police vehicle across the gravel shoulder, dragging it directly toward the steep embankment that dropped into the black water of the lake. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. The powerful engine roared, the RPM needle jumping into the red. The rear tires spun frantically, kicking up a massive cloud of gravel, dirt, and mud. The tires screamed, trying to find traction on the loose shoulder, but the sideways momentum was too strong. We were sliding toward the edge. I turned my head and looked out the passenger side window. The lake was churning. The dark, flat surface of the water was boiling, sending thick, white foam crashing against the rocks. Rising out of the freezing black water were 4 figures. It was the family. The mother, the father, the 2 children. But they were not human anymore. They were the bloated, skeletal, rotting corpses from the camera monitor. Their flesh was grey and peeling. Their empty eye sockets stared blankly at my cruiser. Their jaws were unhinged, locked into that wide, horrific grin. They were suspended in the air. Attached to the back of each rotting corpse was a massive, thick, muscular appendage. They looked like dark, wet, glistening tentacles, thicker than tree trunks, emerging from the deep water of the lake. The tentacles were fused directly into the spines of the corpses, using the dead human bodies like fleshy, rotting puppets. The tentacles extended from the lake, reaching up the rocky embankment. The rotting puppet corpses of the family were pressed directly against the side of my cruiser. Their bloated, skeletal hands were gripping the window frames, the door handles, the wheel wells. The strength of the appendages was impossible. They were dragging the heavy police cruiser sideways through the deep gravel, inch by agonizing inch, pulling me closer to the drop-off. The smell of the stagnant water and the rotting flesh was overwhelming, filling the cabin of the cruiser. The metal doors buckled inward under the crushing pressure of the tentacles. The passenger side window shattered, spraying tiny cubes of safety glass across the front seat. One of the bloated, rotting arms reached through the broken window. The skeletal fingers, dripping with thick lake mud, grabbed the fabric of my passenger seat, pulling the cruiser harder toward the cliff. The rear tires of my cruiser slipped over the edge of the embankment. The back of the vehicle dropped violently, the undercarriage slamming against the sharp rocks. My stomach dropped. I was angled upward, staring at the night sky. The black water of the lake was churning wildly, just a few feet below my rear bumper. I had exactly 1 second before the center of gravity shifted completely and the cruiser tumbled backward into the deep water. I grabbed the steering wheel with both hands, locked my elbows, and slammed my heavy police boot completely down on the accelerator pedal. The engine screamed, pushing maximum torque to the all-wheel drive system. The front tires, still gripping the solid asphalt of the highway lane, bit down hard. The rubber burned against the road, filling the air with thick, white smoke. For a terrifying, agonizing second, the cruiser held completely stationary, suspended in a brutal tug-of-war between the horsepower of the engine and the crushing strength of the tentacles in the lake. The metal frame groaned. The engine whined. Then, the front tires caught traction. The cruiser violently jerked forward. The sudden, explosive forward momentum ripped the vehicle out of the grip of the rotting corpses. I heard a wet, sickening, tearing sound as the skeletal hands gripping the window frame were physically ripped away from the tentacles. The cruiser launched forward, climbing over the edge of the embankment and slamming hard onto the flat asphalt of the highway. The rear tires caught the road, propelling the vehicle forward like a missile. I did not let off the gas pedal. I kept my foot floored. I looked in the rearview mirror. The massive, wet tentacles were writhing on the gravel shoulder, aggressively slapping the ground where my cruiser had just been. The rotting bodies of the family dangled limply from the ends of the appendages. As I sped away, the thing slowly pulled the tentacles back down the embankment, dragging the skeletal puppets beneath the black, churning surface of the lake, disappearing without a splash. I drove at over 110 miles per hour down the county highway. I did not turn on my sirens. I did not radio dispatch to tell them what happened. I just drove, staring straight ahead, gripping the wheel until my hands went numb. I did not stop until I saw the bright, artificial canopy of this fuel station. I pulled under the lights and threw the cruiser into park. I have been sitting here ever since. I have checked the passenger side of my vehicle. The window is completely shattered. The heavy metal doors are deeply dented, crushed inward by a massive, circular pressure. Sitting on the passenger seat, resting amidst the broken glass, are 3 severed, skeletal fingers, completely coated in thick, foul-smelling lake mud. I am not going back to the station. I am leaving the keys in the ignition, and I am walking away from this job. I do not care about the rules anymore. I am writing this on my phone and posting it here as a direct warning to anyone driving alone at night. If you are traveling down a desolate highway near a large body of deep water, and you see a vehicle driving slowly, drifting over the lines, trying to get your attention, do not stop. Do not pull over to help them. That transmission ended 47 minutes ago. The cruiser was found abandoned under those fluorescent lights. 3 skeletal fingers were recovered from the passenger seat, and forensic analysis confirmed they had been underwater for approximately 30 years. The officer has not been seen since. His phone was found on the dashboard, this recording looping endlessly. We do not know if he fled on foot, or if something followed him from that lake. Here is my question to you. If you were parked on that shoulder, seeing a normal family in your rear view while watching corpses tap on your dashcam, would you have trusted your eyes, or would you have trusted the screen? What would you have done differently? Thank you for maintaining connection to this archive. For accessing another file from the darkness. The next document is already queued on your screen. Click it. Continue the investigation. And remember, keep your history clear.